Lazy D here. Today I'm going to be working on this Kawasaki Mule SX XC. This is a regular customer. I service this bike every year. It's in good shape, just a service. I just popped the bed and the seat on this thing. I'm going to wash it. I'm just going to show you. It's really not all that dirty, but like once a year, washing this bike when I service it is going to make everything last quite a bit longer. So I'll go through here with my pressure washer, just kind of clean off. This is also going to make it a lot cleaner of a job when I go to service this thing. Another thing I want to point out here is, so every year I service this bike, these mules don't have a service reminder. So for this customer, I just write in 100 hours forward. So this next one will say 1,600 hours, and she'll just call me every time. So if you're working on something that doesn't have a maintenance reminder, you can always just make your own. Okay, I got this machine up on my lift. I'm letting it run for a few minutes. I try to do this before oil changes so the oil is warmer. It'll run out faster. You can see it's quite a bit cleaner after I washed it. Not only will this make my work better work, but it allows me to inspect everything better. So if it's clean and there's an issue, it's a lot easier to spot than something that's covered in mud. This also kind of weird. You can see this strap I put across here. I'm using that off the suspension to keep the suspension loaded while I lift it up. The engine is mounted in the rear suspension swing arm, and if you let the whole arm kind of hang down and try to drain the oil, it's at the wrong angle. So this is going to allow me to keep the engine more level and drain more of the dirty oil out. These are the parts I'm going to use for this service. I was able to get these bundled together in a maintenance kit through Amazon. So it's got 2 quarts of oil, the oil filter, spark plug, and the engine air filter. The front differential and the transmission call for, you need gear oil. They call for different gear oils. I'm going to use this Lucas Trans and Diff Lube gear oil in both. I looked at the specs. It's close enough for me. This is not a high performance machine. So I'm going to use this. This is a belt intake air filter. A lot of times I replace these, but in most cases you could just blow these out with compressed air as long as you get good airflow through. I don't think it's super critical. A lot of bikes don't even have a filter for the air that cools the clutches and the belt. This is a factory belt. I would definitely recommend, if you're replacing a belt, to use a factory one. This machine's never had the belt replaced and has 1,500 hours on it. So I recommended to the customer to replace it. They said, go for it. The factory belts are a little bit expensive. This was $150. There's a lot of Amazon aftermarket belts that you can get for much less. In my case, I'm installing it for a customer, and it kind of removes any doubt from my mind that I'm going to have an issue with quality. So there are, heavy duty marketed belts that are aftermarket, and that's great. I would recommend using factory stuff as much as you can. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and drain the oil. Right there is the engine oil drain plug. It's a 19 millimeter on the outside. It looks like it's an 8 millimeter hex on the inside if you want to use that tool instead. And the oil filter is right above it. A little bit difficult to get to, but I'm going to use a ratchet wrench through this hole here, and that seems to work for me. So pretty milky looking. I don't know if you can tell from there. Oh, there's a mess. Pretty brown. Sign of water getting in there at some point, so it's a good thing we're changing it. Got my got my strap wrench here. This is what I'm gonna use to get the oil filter off. Before I put the new oil filter on, I'm gonna try to wipe the mating surface up here as best I can. New oil filter. Some people are really sticklers for using fresh oil. I'm okay with using used oil on the sealing surface of this. Never had a problem. There we go. Here's a drain plug. It's plastic. The torque spec is 15 foot-pounds for this. I would go very light. This O-ring is actually what seals it, so once the flange of this drain plug is up against the engine block, you don't have to tighten it much more. Just snugging it up is perfect for these. I'm gonna go ahead and fill up the engine oil now. The owner's manual says it takes 1.2 quarts. This can overflow pretty easily, so pour slowly. Kind of keep an eye down where the funnel's going. You can see it start to back up. If you try to dump in this whole quart and let it go down the funnel at its own pace, you're gonna have a mess. But now I put in the 1.2. I'm gonna put the dipstick back in, start it, let it run for a few, and recheck the oil level after the oil filter's filled up. So I'm just gonna let this run for about 30 seconds. I'm gonna shut it off, and that's gonna let the oil circulate. Then I can check the final oil level after everything's been kind of filled up. So the level's a little lower than I like, so I'm going to add a little bit more. So like I said, the manual says 1.2 quarts with an oil filter change. I put in about 1.5 and it's right where I want it. It's still in the crosshatch marks on the dipstick, right below the high marks. I'm going to drain the front differential now. I'm use a 10mm ratchet wrench for this. It's just right up in this hole here. It's a good idea if you're not comfortable or you think for some reason you might break it, for any gear cases like this, to drain, or not to drain, to crack open the fill opening before you take the drain plug out. If you drain this and then somehow booger up the fill plug, then you can't get it out. You're not going to be able to fill this out, and it's going to leave you with a machine that's not drivable. So something to think about with any gear cases, trying to get the fill plug broken open first to make sure you do that correctly before draining the fluid out and not being able to fill it back up if you have a problem later. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the drain plug back in the front differential. The torque spec for this one's 15 foot-pounds. It's kind of hard to reach up in here. Most kits don't come with the sealing ring that goes on this drain plug. You could reuse the original one a few times, but getting an assortment to have on hand and just to replace it's great. Now I'm going to remove the fill plug from the front differential. This is a 17mm. I just have my 17mm short socket on like a 6-inch extension and a ratchet. It's about perfect to get in there. Okay, so this you're going to want to fill to the bottom of that fill plug hole. So you might need a hose or something. Usually I can wiggle a quart in here. And as I'm filling, I'm squeezing it in there. I'm going to turn the wheel. And this is going to help this thick oil work its way around the gearbox. You'll see it's already overflowing. But you want to do this until it's actually full, because it can be deceiving when you're filling it from the fill hole side. I'm gonna go ahead and put my filler cap back in. The torque for this is 21 foot-pounds, so it's a little bit more. This just has an O-ring inside, so you probably go a little bit lighter. Can't go wrong with the factory spec, but I've had these break before by overdoing them. It doesn't hurt to have a spare one of these on hand. Now I've moved back to the transmission. While I have these in the air, I kind of drain the oil out of everything, and then as I lower it down, I'll fill up each component as I go, so I don't have to go up and down the lift so many times. So the drain plug on this transmission is a 17 millimeter, and I can get my ratchet wrench on it. While I'm waiting for this transmission oil to finish draining, this is a good time to kind of look over this machine real well and see if there's any other damage or worn items that I might find. Stuff you should really be checking is your brakes, your steering stuff. I see a lot of CV boots that tear. If you catch those early enough, you can replace the boot without having to replace the whole axle. Ball joints, suspension bushings. Up here you can see the steering rack, outer tie rod ends, inner tie rod ends, wheel bearings. So to inspect wheel bearings, you'd grab your tire and wheel at like 12 and 6, and you'd shake it up and down and see if there's any looseness there. You might need someone to give you a hand, so while they shake, if you feel any looseness, you can see where it's loose at. If you want to feel your steering for looseness, you'd put your hands at 6 and 3 and then shake the wheel back and forth. And same thing, if you feel any looseness, you could have someone look or have someone shake while you can look and see what components are loose. There's a drive shaft here that has U-joints. This is the drive shaft that goes to the front differential. You might find a U-joint loose. Some of these have grease fittings. I don't think this one does. I'm looking in here. It doesn't look to me like it does. Yeah, so all these U-joints, there's 3 U-joints here, so you'd want to check all those out. What else could we look at? Just general brakes and hoses, cables, anything like that. The exhaust, you want to look for any holes, or if you see any black spots on the exhaust, that's an indication it's leaking somewhere. You might have a break. Some customers care about that, some don't. But if you blow a hole in the exhaust, these machines will be quite a bit louder. And then just general tire condition. I see a lot of bikes that got the tires on backwards, which isn't a big deal, but sometimes you can rotate them around for the customer so they're the right way, and looks a lot cleaner when you're done. So yeah, just look everything over as best you can. Look for any damage, leaks, and you might be surprised how much stuff you find. Okay, the transmission's drained enough for me. Usually I wait for something to drain enough to where whatever's coming out has gone from a stream to a drip. We're right about at that point. I went ahead and I put a new gasket on this drain plug. You can buy assortment kits. I keep them on hand because it's nice to have all the sizes for different drain plugs. A lot of kits come with these also. I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in. The torque for this bolt is 11 foot-pounds. It's pretty small. I'm gonna snug it up. I'm comfortable doing it by hand. Yeah, that's probably even a little bit more than 11 foot-pounds. Now we're under the bed looking at the top of the transmission. There's 2 plugs here. This upper one, I'm gonna loosen with pliers, is the fill plug, and this lower yellow one is the level. So I'm gonna open each of these up. There's our level indicator. I take this one out. Put my funnel in there. And then the manual says should take 2.3 or 2 1/3, 2.33 quarts. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. I'm going to probably add 2 quarts and check it, then top it up from there. I'm going to go ahead and check this now. So I'm going to pull the dipstick out, wipe it off. Kawasaki calls out not to screw it in when you're checking. So you're just going to set it in without threading it in, pull it back out, and I'm right at the hash marks where we want it, right at the high line. So I probably put a little bit less than 2.3 in. You can never drain everything out, so you might be a little bit closer to 2 when you do this, but good to check. If you overfill it a little bit, not a huge deal. And then these caps, when you tighten them, they're plastic, so tighten accordingly. Don't go crazy on these things. I just tighten them with your fingers as best you can. Don't wrench on them with a set of pliers. And it's pretty easy to cross thread them, so if it feels like it's not going in right, it's not going in right. Retry. I'm gonna go ahead and change our air filter now. The only tool you should need is your hands and a Phillips screwdriver. So there's one that goes around this ducting, one Phillips head. I'm just gonna loosen that guy up. Doesn't have to come all the way out. And then there's one that holds the filter in place to the filter box. So this is just a number 2 Phillips. This air filter doesn't look too dirty. You probably blow it out. I prefer just replacing them at a service and not worrying about it than trying to blow them out and maybe damage the filter. I just dropped that screw, don't do that. You're gonna need that. So, new filter. Go ahead and put that on. Before I tighten the clamp, I'm gonna get this back screw first. That holds the filter to the filter housing. And then the band basically that holds it onto the ducting, I'll snug that up like that. Put our lid back on. It is not uncommon to find rodent nests in air boxes, so you might find yourself cleaning a rodent nest out as well. Always good to check on, especially people who are using these to primarily feed their livestock. A lot of hay chaff ends up around side-by-sides, and mice will grab that and run in this little hole here, or whatever air box it's on, and great spot for a nest. Right by the dipstick is, you can see back there, the spark plug. So I'm going to go ahead and use these pliers to pull this boot off carefully. It's pretty easy to rip these. There's a 13/16 socket. I'm going to put the spark plug gap and the spark plug torque in the video right here. In my experience, most plugs come gapped, but it, doesn't hurt to check. Might be off a little bit, or if you're going to reuse yours and clean it up, you can always reset the gap on the old plug. This old plug looks pretty good. We're still going to go ahead and change it. Although the box said Honda on it, that this plug came in for a Kawasaki, it's an NGK plug. Next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace the belt air intake filter. So I'm going to take this cover off. It's underneath it here. There's 8 push clips, and then these 2 hoses that connect it. One is the intake for the engine and one is the intake for the belt air. Just need a Phillips screwdriver, and it's like a hose clamp that holds it onto the frame. Oh, there's 6 actually, not 8. Once the belt cover's off, it's very easy to get to. Or not the belt cover. This, I guess it'd be kind of a service cover splash plate deal. Should be able to just pop these 3 clips off. Pretty dirty. I'm going to put a new one. You could just as easily blow this out. I'm gonna go ahead and reset the service reminder on this. A little bit of brake clean should loosen it up. Wipe it with a rag. And reapply the new one. So I'm just gonna do a 100-hour interval on this. So I'm gonna go to 1600. And it's not the most beautiful thing, but it's effective. So that's what we're looking for. So the service on this Kawasaki Mule is complete. I'm also gonna do a belt, but I'm gonna do a separate video for that. Thanks for watching. If this was helpful, please like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate it. Thank you.